Welcome to the Women Inspire Aspire podcast. We have with us today Devyani Verma, who is going to talk about how she is enabling learning in hundreds of schools in India.
Hi Devyani, thank you for accepting my invite to appear in the podcast. How are you doing today?
Hi, Venkat. Thank you for having me. Really excited to speak with you. I'm doing really well.
That's great. That's great. That's wonderful. So I'm quite excited to talk to you today. So let's get started by talking about your background, especially from your childhood, about your value systems, how you grew up, your background, etc.
Yeah, sure. So I was born in a upper middle class family, educated parents, both working as well. From very early on in my childhood, the importance of education was reinforced both by my mother and my father. They always made sure that I knew education will drive my life and it will shape me into whoever I want to become in the future. So the value of education was extremely high in the household right from the beginning. I think my mother also during my childhood fought many odds to be able to work, and I think just seeing her journey was extremely inspirational and also sort of made me a firm believer in feminism. So I've grown up with a lot of feminist values because of my mother. Equality is something, is a value that I truly live by, and I've always tried my entire life to have independent thinking and not be bogged down by what girls are supposed to do in both personal and professional life. That's a value that has been extremely close to my heart. I've done my engineering as a graduation. I think in my second or my third year of engineering, I realized that I was lacking purpose in my life, and I think the values that I held very dear to me were seeming somewhere to be lost while I was studying engineering. And it was in the second or third year I decided that I needed to do something else in my life. I can't be doing an engineering related job. And that's what pushed me to explore, okay, what's more out there, right? What's more beyond engineering? Where I stumbled upon Teach for India and many other organizations. I actually volunteered with one similar organization in my college days where I got a chance to work with children from a government school in Delhi for about 3 months. Thoroughly enjoyed my time there, and I think that experience made me realize that this is where I belong, which further pushed me to apply for Teach for India after my college. Post college, I worked with another organization called Josh Talks, which was also in the social impact space. Worked with them for 2 years, had immense learnings while I was there. But I think I was missing being in a classroom, interacting with children. And I remembered again my volunteering time in college and, about Teach for India. And I just felt like after 2 years in Josh Talks, it was the right time to just switch. It was also the time when COVID was just about starting. So it was in 2020, April, when I decided to leave Josh Talks and step into Teach for India. When COVID time was hitting, I was also just, thinking that this is the time when this sector needs me the most. And hence, I just came to Teach for India and have not been able to leave since then and have had a great journey.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing those details. So let's start the discussion with education, right? So, what's your idea of education? I have heard many views during my other podcasts with several people. Different people have different perspective of education and how to go about it. What is your view of what education is?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I was just thinking about it today. I am a part of this another learning course. And I had a very deep reflection after that session ended where I felt like, I was in school never taught how to learn. What to learn was something that was, told to me. So you have to learn science, math, English, social science. You have to score marks. But I think a key element that was missing was how do you learn? And I think for me, the idea of education is to teach children, individuals of how do you learn, right? And learning is possible in every way, right? You observe something happening in front of you and you learn something from it. It's not necessarily from a textbook or an article that you read, right? So I think for me, the idea of education is that if you're able to build that critical thinking in the individual to be able to pick up learnings from everything that's happening around them, I think for me, that's education. And that was something that was really missing in how I was educated, both in my school and in my college. And even while working in Teach for India, I realized this, that I was working with 10th graders. So my students already came in with a lot of lived experience. They were in that phase of life where they were discovering their identity, they were discovering their values, they were making sense of all the complex things that were happening around them. And I felt as a teacher, my job was to just enable that critical thinking within them to be able to learn from everything that they are seeing happening around. And I thoroughly believe in that idea of education. I feel education is a tool to simply enable the potential that's already inside an individual. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Okay, great. Yes, I agree that, learning from everywhere around you and looking at things and observing things and learning from your environment is quite important. Even in the AI field today, people are talking about AI systems being able to observe and react accordingly. So why is it not even possible for a human being who is learning, that too in the development ages? Great. But that also makes me curious about the curriculum and the subjects that are given to you, especially in the primary as well as the middle classes. You don't have a choice, you have to pursue. Now that you have NEP, you might have some choices about what subjects you want to pursue, but typically you are given a set of subjects and you have to select between them. Now, where do you draw the line between the curiosity that you have on a specific topic? It might not be in your curriculum. How much importance do you give for the curiosity that you have on something and the necessity of going through the curriculum and learning the subjects?
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you that, I mean, at the end, there is a set curriculum and we are a part of a system. And as much as I'd like to build curiosity, critical thinking among my students, I do, of course, also want them to score well, right? So I think when I was a fellow, this was back in 2020. I did my fellowship for 2 years. So for 2 years I was in the classroom. I think it was, at the start, it was very difficult to strike that balance. I remember getting this feedback from my then manager as well, that it's great that I'm trying out new things in the classroom, but will that lead to academic achievement eventually, was coming out as a question. I think what I learned as a fellow was, while we can't change what subjects are taught to the children, the approach of teaching is something that we can be very innovative with. And that's how I tried to bring in the balance. That while the content can continue to be from the textbooks that the NCRT and the CBSE board is mandating, but how I teach that content is something that I want to be very innovative with. So, can I get resources that are relevant within our context and resources that are also globally informed to be able to give knowledge that is even beyond textbook within the same topic to my students? So I think that that's how I try to draw the balance as a fellow. Having said that, I do feel that it's very difficult sometimes, especially I think in higher grades. Like in 10th, my students had to appear for board, and it's important for them to be able to score decent marks in board examinations to be able to get their streams in 11th, 12th, and then further in college. I mean, I think it's easier said than done. It's definitely very difficult to strike that balance, but I think there is a lot of merit and a lot of scope in innovating in your teaching methods, your lesson plans, even though you can't change the content too much.
Interesting. I want to talk about three topics that I feel is important in the way education is important, especially in these days of climate change. I think right now we are just looking at environmental education, planting trees and how to be climate sensitive and all that. There is another important topic also about the survival skills when climate suddenly changes. For example, in Kerala, there is heavy rains right now. The intensity of the rains is too much. So I feel that there is a need on top of the environmental education that we have. We also need to have some survival skills that we need to give the children. That's number one. Number two, I wanted to discuss about peer learning and your opinion about it. So let's first hear your thoughts on environment and how we can integrate this to the mainstream education.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, in my work at Teach for India, currently I work with a lot of other organizations and non-for-profits that are working across the country. There are two of our partner organizations that actually work on climate education. One of them is in the Borpeta district of Assam, and the Borpeta district is flooded for good 4 to 6 months every year, and every year there are many houses that are displaced, schools get shut, a lot of people suffer because of the floods that are in the region. And I've also had the chance to visit his site, especially the people who've been living in these villages. They're very aware of how to navigate this situation, how to sort of come out of this disaster that happens almost every year, but I think they do not have enough resources to be able to implement it. It just becomes a gap in that sense for them. And I 100% agree with you that climate is not a part of national priority for us. Like, I've rarely seen our political leaders also talking about it. Every now and then there's a news of some forest in India, getting cut to build a park, build a building, build something else. And it just makes me realize that, when there's no political will towards climate, it becomes very difficult for people, especially people who are in the marginalized communities, to be able to survive. I think, of course, some organizations are doing great work in building that resilience and making sure that people at the grassroots are able to survive some national disasters that happen in certain regions every year. But yeah, I think it is the need of the hour to become a part of the curriculum. And it also makes me wonder about the value system of our country and the education system at large. I feel, especially in mainstream education, EVS was a subject, but it was just taught as a subject to be able to give exams and pass it. Like, I remember studying EVS in 6th and 7th grade, but I remember studying it in a way that, okay, this is a subject, I'll have an exam, I'll pass it, and that's about it. We really do not build enough urgency around that subject. It's also often treated as an extracurricular subject, right? And that is something that is really, really worrying. And I think as individuals, as children in school, we're not taught about climate in a really good way, in an effective way. I think there's so much more that teachers can do to be able to really communicate the urgency, even among children, right? I mean, even children can do so much. Children can take this knowledge back to their homes, back to their families, back to their parents. Like, I remember, it's a very small example, but I remember when I was in school in 8th grade, there was an article that one of my teachers had shared with us in our classroom about how air conditioning has caused a hole in our ozone layer. And I remember feeling devastated about it. I remember feeling very scared about it. And it created that urgency, which led me to tell at my home that, we will not have air conditioners. And up till, I think, 10th, 11th grade, even 12th grade, we did not have any air conditioning in our home. Eventually, it became unbearable. So, of course, my parents said we need one now. But I think that sense of urgency, it needs to be built in our classrooms. We often feel that, what can children really do? What can students really do, right? But it's so important to flip the narrative and see children as important stakeholders in solving real issues that our country and the world are facing. Yeah, I don't know whether I answered your question, Venkat, but these were just some thoughts that came up to me when you asked.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts. Basically, my question was whether it should be included in the curriculum, which you answered. And I think we need to look at how to bring this into the curriculum through various means, like approaching the government and private organizations which are working on the curriculum to see how this can be included as a urgent thing that we need to address. So thank you for answering that.
Yeah.
Let's move on and talk about peer learning. So I'm
Yeah.
hearing from all sides that peer learning is important and we need to implement. What are your thoughts on peer learning?
Yeah. So I've honestly seen peer learning as extremely impactful in one of these amazing organizations that TFX has been partnering with, called Involve Edu. They actually work in Bangalore, and they have this peer teaching model where they have students from older grades teaching students from lower grades. Sometimes it's the same grade, within the same grade, some students are called the edu leaders, and then they're teaching children within their same grade as well. And I had the opportunity to have a conversation with some of these students who were chosen as edu leaders. And I just asked, what excites them the most about being an educational leader in their classroom for their peers. So some of them were edu leaders for maths, and a lot of them shared that, Didi, when we started studying math, there was this internal fear of the subject, so much so that we weren't able to perform well, we weren't able to give any answers in the classroom. We would just not do the homework because the fear was just too much, to a point where they said that, when this organization came in, and they said that, you can, this is an opportunity for you to become an educational leader, for you to teach your peers maths, English, and science. A lot of students said that that became such a positive incentive for them to work on their fear of the subject, to a point where they've now reached that they've started to love the subject. I think it's such an interesting model where it consciously sees students as leaders, right? Children as leaders. It looks at the potential of the child. And that is very, very interesting in the peer teaching model, honestly, for me. As a fellow, even when I was in my classroom, I also tried to try out peer teaching in some of my lessons that I was delivering. And I could see that, some students who were academically already doing well, naturally, initially, they were chosen as peer leaders of their groups. But I saw the other students in the group just really wanting to be that. I saw a significant shift in engagement in my students as well when this peer teaching model was implemented. From where I remember a student who wouldn't raise her hand in any class for any question, for anything, to a point where she came up to me and said, Didi, what do I need to do to become a peer group leader? So I think in that sense, the peer teaching model, I feel it's just really amazing if done well, if implemented well, because it really tries and identifies the child's potential and sees them as leaders. I think when I started this work, it was reinforced in Teach for India through many conversations that, we're not working for children, we are working with children. And it's so important to see children as important voices in all the decisions that we take, whether in our classrooms, whether at policy level. And I think this peer teaching model is such a great tool to bring that idea, that notion into reality. I've honestly seen very positive impact of a peer teaching model in one of the organizations in my own classroom.
Great. Thanks for sharing that. I actually did a podcast with Pratibha Narayan, who is leading involved. So you might want to take a look at that podcast sometime. Let's move on and talk about special needs, right? So children with special needs. In one of the podcasts, I heard 1 out of 6 children is in the need of special need. How are we going to address this? Not just the curriculum, but also in the setup, the way the classroom is set up, the teaching setup is done. It needs to be friendly to all types of children. What are your thoughts?
I've personally not had a lot of experience in, the special needs sector within education, but I think from brief interactions with some of the entrepreneurs that are working with children with special needs, I think one thing that I've very commonly heard is that, more than the setup, the infra, of course, all of that is very, very important. The mindset that often people hold towards children and individuals with special needs, I think that is very difficult to tackle sometimes. Even within parents who have children with special needs, I've often seen entrepreneurs say that, it's such a challenge to even have the parents realize that while their child is with special needs, there's still so much that that child can still do. I think that acceptance among parents is just so hard, and I understand. I mean, I really empathize with parents as well, but I think that mindset is very hard to tackle. And honestly, I do not have an answer to that, right? How do you build that? How do you change and shift that mindset? I mean, of course, I've seen some entrepreneurs create these amazing proof points through their years and years of work that have led to, I'm sure, some people, some supporters shift that mindset a little bit of what can be possible with children and individuals with special needs. And I do not have an answer, but I do feel like it's the mindset that we really need to work on towards, what is possible for individuals with special needs. I feel that when we encounter a child with special needs, often, and I'll say that this for myself as well, right? Even when I was a fellow, I think an automatic bias gets created. We start to expect, our expectations go way lower when we come across individuals with special needs. And that is something that I have a problem with. The mindset, the bias that comes into play when it's about children with special needs. I also actually want to share that there are some positive things that at least I've seen in some of the Delhi schools that I've visited, that I've worked in, with regards to infrastructure. Like, I see now a lot of schools have ramps, they have special need friendly washrooms, they have a counselor in place. In a lot of schools, they have one dedicated special educator as well. I could see these positive changes both in state government and municipal schools. I remember in one of the municipal schools talking to a special educator, right? And I was just asking her, what are some challenges that you face, when you work with children here? And she said that, for me, it's very hard to identify children in the classroom who are with special needs, because actually it wasn't even identification. She said, it's, even though I know that this child is with special needs, it's very hard to convince parents to say that they need that extra support, and so let them come in a separate class, let them stay back maybe after school for a little bit, let them have that special attention given, because parents start to feel that, why are you singling out my child? No, everything is okay with my child. The mindset is something that's a really, really big gap.
Yeah, absolutely. That needs to be a lot of change and transformation that needs to take place in the society on that. In addition, there are also a lot of skill sets that are required in addition to what the teachers already have. We need specialists. So all this needs to be built into the system. So it's a very challenging work. There's a lot that needs to be done. I hope that the organizations will provide support and let's get that integrated into the system. Let's now move on to your hobbies and interests and what do you do apart from work for fun?
I think right now my life is my work. I think I really, really enjoy my work so much. Whenever I get some time, I love to read. I used to read a lot when I was in college. It has gone significantly down now, but I still really love to read, pick up a book and read. I'm a fictional story reader. I have been trying to read non-fiction, but I haven't had much luck there. So I really love to read. I think another hobby is travel, and I think that's what another part of my job that I really love. I love to travel. I love to, be in a new city, in a new context, learn about the culture, explore the diversity of the country, try their regional foods. I really, really love exploring new places, new cultures, and new contexts. Really enjoy dancing. I've been a trained dancer. I've trained in Bharatnatyam, I've trained in contemporary, ballet, jazz, a little bit of hip hop. So I've been dancing since I can remember. These three would be my hobbies.
Fantastic. Let's talk about the societal issues you care about, of course, apart from education.
I think apart from education, what I really care about, when I was a child, I saw my mother struggle to get out, to work, to fight for something very basic. And I think that's something that I deeply, deeply still care about, is, just genders facing discrimination just because they belong to specific gender. And I think even beyond gender, I think even caste discrimination is something that really, really bothers me. And in my school, when I was a fellow, it was just so disheartening to see that some of the teachers also reinforcing that caste discrimination in classrooms among children, where I remember one of the teachers in my classroom telling my students that you come from a certain background, what will you achieve? Eventually you will work as house helps in different homes. And I wasn't in school that day. I my children told this to me the next day, and I felt so disheartened with the discrimination being so rampant even during this time. We've had independence for more than 75 years now. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar had addressed caste discrimination and brought in policies, laws to ensure that this discrimination ends, but with the hope that in some amount of years this would go away and we would not need those laws, reservations, and those policies to protect a certain section of the group. But even today, it's, I mean, every now and then I see a news of a Dalit individual either being beaten, being discriminated for something very simple that they did, for something as simple as drinking water from a pump that was supposed to be for the higher caste individuals. And I mean, it's so difficult to wrap my head around the discrimination that people continue to face because of their caste, their gender, their race, their color. So yeah, that's something that still bothers me very, very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your views. Do
Yeah.
you have any questions for me or about the podcast?
Yeah, Venkat, I wanted to understand what are some key themes or things that you're trying to explore through this podcast?
As I said, this podcast is about life experiences, sharing the career, profession, background, hobbies and interests, societal issues, etc. Apart from that, I have found some of the key themes that I have come across many people that I have spoken to. One is education, of course. The other is art and crafts. Also, mental health is coming up. I had a conversation with a psychologist recently. So, yeah, it's building. If you look at my YouTube channel for the podcast, you will find many playlists that are specific to themes. So, you can go through them.
Thanks, Venkat. I actually had one more question if there's time.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I was wondering, because you've spoken to so many people, what have been some top 2 learnings that you've had?
One top learning is that people fight for whatever they want to do in life, which is great. The other thing is, of course, a lot of struggle in life. It takes a lot of willpower to do things that they are doing, which is great. So I mean that's exactly what I've come through, and it's great to talk to these wonderful people and get to know so many things. And thank you so much for appearing in the podcast and sharing your views. I wish you all the best in your life and whatever you aspire to do. Please take care and bye for now.
Thank you, Venkat. Thank you again for your time.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye. Take care.
That was an insightful podcast with Devyani Verma. Please subscribe to this channel and follow it for more awesome podcasts. Opinions expressed by the guests in this podcast are their own. The host or the sponsors of the podcast do not condone the opinions expressed by the guests or the actions arising out of those opinions. Any decisions or actions that the listeners might take as a result of listening to this podcast must be based on their own judgment and will be at their own risk. The podcast host or their sponsors will not be held responsible for the consequences of any actions and or decisions taken as a result of any content in this podcast.